Hi, this is Michael Manasco, the Instructional Coordinator Librarian at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. I'm also the English librarian, so that's why you're hearing my voice right now. I am giving you just a few tips here in this video for EH246, Speculative Realities. I want to give you a few recommended resources, kind of places to go, and a couple of strategies for researching this text in context project. So a few of the takeaways for this video. Some of you may have used this tool before, but I want to make sure you know how to use our Search the Library or Pathfinder discovery service. This is sort of a catalog, if you want to think of it that way, of books, articles, newspapers. It's a way to discover a variety of formats on different topics. So it's a great place to start for something multidisciplinary like this project. I also want to point out a few potentially useful databases, although it's not a one-size-fits-all. Just because you're in an English class doesn't mean that you go to the English databases or the things that have been tagged as English, relevant to English classes necessarily. Some of them will be very good, but you'll need to think about your topic. With this book, H.G. Wells' Time Machine, it's not just about literary criticisms. Some of those will be helpful, but also you'll be thinking about your topic. So there may be science databases, sociology databases. I'm not going to go over everything. I kind of just want to point you toward where to go and show you a couple of searches. I also want to point out our periodical finder or a journal finder on the homepage. That may be helpful for some of you. If you identify specific journals, that might be helpful to search within these niche criticisms and give you a couple of web search strategies as well. So for your project's research goals, I know you're looking to engage with 19th century British history ideals, essentially, of the topics being covered in the Time Machine. That's part of it. This is about reading in context so you can better understand these things. As one of the quotes, the Margaret Atwood quote that you've used already in this course, science fiction, it's always about the now. Speculative fiction is always about the human, really, when it comes down to it. It's always been about exploring the way we work as a society, as biological beings, as beings of potential. So these are all topics that are explored in speculative fiction. The areas that you've been given to explore the context of both period-specific and contemporary ideas are the below, listed there, either evolutionary or spatio-temporal. You're essentially either picking sort of an avenue of exploring biology, something like if you're looking at evolution, how the species separate in the book, but also what the context of evolution itself in a 21st century context versus the 19th century, or perhaps society, social strata, or social classes. Spatio-temporal might be the fourth dimension or notions of that if you're trying to explore that over time, as well as apocalyptic themes, dystopias, end of the world, life after humans or without humans. And most of the things you have to explore, the areas you have to focus on, are trying to find articles or other sources that support these ideas. How your topic is understood now, how it was understood then, and how it's changed over time. Now, the third, fourth, and fifth bullet point there are really more about what you're going to do with the information you find. It's trying to understand while reviewing the Time Machine itself, as you kind of parse through the text, are you seeing manifestations in the fiction of contemporary ideals in the 19th century? It's important to understand what those are so you can understand when Wells is twisting those on their head or commenting sometimes. It's hard to pick up on satire or any sort of manipulation of tropes, we might call them, if you're not familiar with what those standard facts are. So that's important. So to do that, you'll need a variety of sources. A couple of ways you can do that. Primary sources, of course, are things written at the time of the topic in question. So secondary sources give us commentary, but it's all about perspective. That's the point. You look at different sources for perspective. This is an excerpt, for example, from across the pond in America, but an excerpt from the Dallas Morning News from 1895, November. It's found in the early American newspapers database we have. That may be an angle you take to look in some of the older newspaper collections and see if there's a mention. For example, here, it's an excerpt from an article I found where someone was reviewing the Time Machine in the late 1895 and discussing in the article about the notion of adventure fiction. And it's important to acknowledge and see where we have an actual tangible anchor where people will acknowledge these genres, a comparison to Jules Verne here in a way. But also you can see in this article some commentary on adventure fiction and the notion of time travel and traveling to a time with or without humans, that just knowing that that's there. But a lot of the information you'll find will be in the secondary articles, and that's a lot of what you'll find in Pathfinder. This is an excerpt from a journal called Adaptation from 2016, so obviously more recent, but just an article that's diving into some of the themes of Wells in the area there about time travel again. Fear of time travel, traveling to the year 800, 2000, 701 AD, and the concept of a dying sun. So solar death, could be a topic there. And the idea of humanity either evolving or just becoming something else, the idea of transhumanism or devolving or evolving. So that's an interesting concept for us now to explore, but it's important to understand perhaps 19th century ideals. And that's where the library can help. Using that Search the Library tool for books and articles, finding some secondary contextual analysis, and we want to point you toward the databases. And this is where I can help. I'll put my contact information at the end of the slides, and you might want to, if these don't work for you, reach out to me and I can recommend a few places to search. So databases can be very subject specific. They're often in the context of a discipline. So if I was interested in something about the fourth dimension and exploring those concepts, I might want to look specifically in some of our science and technology databases, the science behind the fiction. If I wanted to look at commentaries about H.G. Wells himself or the Time Machine or other works like that, I might look at themes of evolution or social class within the context of the work. And that might be a literary criticism database, something like MLA International Bibliography, for example. Or there might be psychological journals, the psychology in response to genre fiction itself. There are a lot of ways we could do this. Journal searching, periodical searching. If you discover particular titles like that Adaptation journal I just looked at an excerpt from, we could look up that title or something like Modern Fiction Studies and dive within. So let's take a quick look at a couple of searches. So going to the homepage at uah.edu/library. If you go here, take a look at the middle of the page, that Search the Library, that Pathfinder tool, big black search bar here. And there is a way to contact the librarians. Monday through Friday, you'll typically see a green live chat button if you want to chat with us during the day. Which again, you can always email me directly if you like. The articles and databases tile is where you'll interface with specific databases, and a journal tile for periodicals. So we go specifically here. I would suggest all of you start with the advanced search option, okay? When you look at your topic, a couple things you might want to keep in mind. Again, if we're looking specifically at, let's say, the fourth dimension as a concept, okay? Now, that as a search is going to be kind of broad. There's going to be a lot going on here. Some books, some articles, right? So one way we might want to do this is, first of all, we might want to hit peer-reviewed journals on the left. So if you'll use that filter over here in Pathfinder, that will ensure you're looking at those academic scholarly commentaries. So I'm seeing a few things popping up here on that concept in general, right? But we need to hone in a bit more. So at this point, it might be wise to even do something as simple as putting quotations to see if that changes things, cleans it up. Medicine in the fourth dimension, that kind of thing. Hitting peer reviewed again, see where that takes us. And I'm still getting some sort of high level titles here, right? Adding a context here is where it gets very helpful. So I suggest for most of your topics, especially when you're looking in context, you typically want to add a tag for 19th century. You'll notice here 19th century, and I change this any field to subject, okay? The subject tag is important. You might want to mix your searches, just as a quick tip in Pathfinder, between keyword or any field it's called and subject. So something like 19th century needs to be there, okay? So when we search now, we can see a few more commentaries that are articles and interpretations that are going to be analyzing this topic with a bit more the concept of the time period. You could even add on something like Great Britain to that to make sure you're getting the context of England. But when you're looking at the time, you might want to branch out a bit. So notice in this article, here's something on life, architecture, math, and the fourth dimension. Always scroll down to the description of these, and it'll give you a bit of an abstract. And for example, this one talks a bit about the concept of a fourth dimension and talks about how it was studied in mathematics in the 19th century. So this would be something to give us some good context to, especially early 19th and 20th century, which talks about dimensions, spiritualism, ethics, and a lot of things. But we have to understand that before you can really understand the book. So if you find an article like this and you like it, remember these articles have built-in citation tools. So all you have to do is click this little citation button, and it'll give you, if you change it to MLA 8th, here's an MLA 8th edition citation. It does APA as well. Make sure you double check these against your MLA style book, and I can help you find those in the library or other online MLA tools. And then if you scroll down a bit further, this will identify different databases you can go to. So it's that easy. For example, it's telling me other tools that host that article I could branch out to. I could click on any one of those. I like the SciTech collection. So if you see ProQuest SciTech, especially for some of the more scientific topics, you might want to just follow that on out. You can close these little boxes that pop up, and this is going to take me to the article where I get an abstract and a full HTML copy of it. Remember, when you get to these databases, it often will give you an HTML sort of article version, but usually there's an option, as here, to download the PDF and get the more print ready option here that has that nice scientific writing style, abstract, introduction, method, research, and discussion. Usually the PDFs are better. I recommend grabbing those because most of them in our databases have the nice hyperlinking now with these smart links to get to other footnotes and so forth. So a lot of stuff, definitely with the fourth dimension. Science Direct and ProQuest Science and Technology are two of the ones I would focus on in that arena. Okay, so that's one quick way to search in Pathfinder. Notice again, just as a quick example, and play with this with your own topics. If I scroll down to details, pay attention to that. So in this article that looks relevant, if I was doing fourth dimension, well, it's got subject tags here for 19th century, dimensionality, and other topics or other terms that I might want to use to search on as well. Okay, so that's one good way to do this. Okay. And I can always go back and forth between academic journals or non-academic journals and scroll through and see what we have at your disposal, right? So those are some ways to do that. And this could go in a variety of topics. If we did the more biological or the life sciences approach, something about human evolution, if you were looking at the Morlocks versus the Eloi, that sort of gets into notions of evolution, but also social evolution. Don't forget those themes. We're getting into social class and dynamics and some of the foibles of Victorian ideals. So keeping it in that Victorian era, and that's another good point I wanted to raise. Notice I'm doing a Boolean search here. And I might want to try something like that. How I say 19th century or Victorian era in parentheses. I've expanded my results now by another 1,000. Okay. And in looking at some of these that are popping up here. So here's something on historicizing humans, evolution, time, and race in the 19th century. So variety of books and articles that I think would be great for you to use. Anything on Victorian science and imagery particularly would be, I think, worth a look. And you can always bounce back and forth again between those peer-reviewed articles and more popular magazines and books to see what kind of sticks out to you. So those are some ways I would interface topically, right? We're looking at solar death, things like that. You might want to go specifically to the databases themselves when you do that. But Pathfinder is a good way to start. So on that note, I want to branch back out to the home page. And if you look here, it says articles and databases. Okay. When I click on that, again, you can go specifically to these tools, right? Things like JSTOR are very good for academic articles as well, and more the humanities angle, sort of the some of the social class issues as well. But if I'm looking at the sciences, again, I can go in here and I could sort by subject, and I could pick just biology, for example. Click that, hit search, and this is the way the library is going to indicate places to search. I won't look in each of these, but you can scroll through and see ones that might jump out to you. For the science topics, I would just quickly recommend Science Direct or ProQuest Science and Technology. Those are two very good ones, both all listed here alphabetically. ProQuest SciTech and Science Direct. Very good ones when it comes to the science side of things, fourth dimension, evolution, biology, that sort of thing. Okay, those would be things I would look at. And I'm going to back out here and change biology now to English, though. Let's look at English. So if I take out, let's clear those filters. And if I click English and hit search, now I've got databases that definitely will be worth your time to find other people who've commented on these themes, right? There's going to be a lot of secondary analysis already on some of this. One major tool I would recommend playing with is the MLA International Bibliography. Okay, this source will link you to a lot of great information, and a good way to start here is just to go broad. Okay, something like H.G. Wells, do author name, last, and then first name, right? And you'll see a variety already popping up here. Here's something on Morlock and Eloy, Shifting Monstrosities, Degeneration, that sort of thing. If you're trying to explore the concept of Victorian ideals of savagery versus civilization, at which points does the time traveler sort of kind of revert to using fire and brute force to kind of fight off the Morlocks versus his use of technology also to illuminate, the sort of devolved Eloy in their own way. So there's a lot of themes of Victorian and modern ideals here being played with. But if you look in MLA bibliography, you'll find a variety of these topics discussed. Concepts of the countryside, utopia, scientific ideals. So that's something I might do. And notice the more terms I add, for example, if you put time machine in quotes, H.G. Wells, see now I'm getting even fewer results, which is good. I'm down to a couple of hundred. And now I've got a couple of new ones here that I wouldn't have terms I may have not been familiar with. The fantasy of travel fiction in the 19th century. That's another angle here. So just doing basic searches like this in MLA will expose you to a lot. This article says, I cannot tell you all the story, narrative, and historical knowledge in the museum. So step back and think for a minute. When you think about society, you think about Victorian ideals, question everything. This article talks about the concept of museums and historical preservation in Victorian ideals. And the abstract here tells us that as the traveler goes to the green porcelain palace, and goes to the library in the book, he comes out with some matches, but it talks about some of the concepts there that if you read it a certain way, play with some of the foibles and some of the problems with Victorian ideals of historical preservation and their own view of society as the pinnacle of civilization, in other words. So it's interesting to look at these different analyses in that way. So it's a good way to expose you to topics some of your classmates may not have thought about yet. So think about using MLA International Bibliography if you haven't already. All right, looking back at some of my recommendations here, some of the databases of note that I would point out. Again, if I'm looking for literary criticisms, I might think about that MLA one. If you're looking at theme articles, things specifically getting into themes like Wells and dystopian lit, things like that, JSTOR and Project Muse are great. Academic Search Complete, Oxford, and Sage are great general multi-purpose databases. Again, you can look those up on your own on the database page and search. And again, Science and Technology, Science Direct and ProQuest, but another database called Greenfile that you may want to explore, which deals specifically with concerns of the climate and the Anthropocene, the era we live in now, and humanity's impact on the environment, where you might search on those topics to get a sense of our current understanding of things like solar death and the end of the world. So those are some things that I might suggest doing. So on that note, bouncing back to the database page on the library here, going back to that A to Z database page, if I go to J and go to JSTOR, JSTOR is going to be great for a wealth of your topics. So even, again, just doing things like fourth dimension and time machine. See how I put that in quotes? Going to get a few journal articles right off the bat. Origins of concepts, that sort of thing. And you see the range of these dates range throughout the 20th century, some more recent, some they're going to go back possibly to the 19th century. So it's a great way to find other articles on these specific topics like fourth dimension or time travel. JSTOR is good because, again, it gives you those humanities style articles. They're going to look a little different than some of the Science Direct articles in the way they're written, but they still follow that same academic style. And notice one good thing about JSTOR is when you click on one good article, the related text is usually pretty good on the left. It's sort of exposing you to other articles to follow. So bouncing back once again to the home screen, If you look at the journal tile here, and I click on that, this is a good place to look up those specific journals if you discover. For example, in Pathfinder searching, you'll see a database. It'll take you somewhere. Take note of that journal. You could look up, for example, modern fiction studies. If you encountered that in your searching, I could look up that particular title, okay? And I could hit the link, and I can either jump down here to browse all the issues, or I can search within. So I could do something like, let's do Fourth Dimension again. And if I search now, I'm going to search within that article, that journal itself. And it, depending on the topic, it could be sort of all over here. We might have to play with that a bit. It looks like this one, it might not be as good for that aspect of Fourth Dimension, but it could be, if we look up time machine or time travel itself, you might could find a few other things. So here we do, and it depends on the journal. It's about better futures, politics, reimagining of Victorian futures, and scientific prophecy. So these are other ways to explore and discover as well. So jumping out from the library now, if you do any web searching and you want to do, let's say, H.G. Wells and time machine and social class, let's say. If you do web search, remember, you're going to get just sort of a mess of non-academic and academic articles. Practice domain searching, if you'll notice what I'm doing on the screen, just by adding a suffix site:.gov, for example. Now I can look at only government sources. In this case, getting things a little all over the place, but here's an interesting article from the National Institute of Health on bodies and science in the 19th century that has something to do with the time machine here and social class itself. I could even do .org and get maybe some Wikipedia articles, things like that, but it's also going to be links to JSTOR, anything with a DOI or direct object identifier. It's going to be databases, that kind of thing. Here's something on imperialism and modernism, the time machine and Victorian class, you know. So a variety of things you might discover otherwise if you were just searching Google without suffix searching. So again, I'm here to help you guys. That's just a quick introduction to our tools. As you think about searching in context, remember to search on your era, 19th century. If you're looking for contextual sources of the day, if you're looking for just more modern takes on it, it's a little easier to search on, but you're wanting to always kind of balance that with some of your literary criticism. So it might be worth searching on your topic. Again, Fourth Dimension, evolution, whatever you're doing. Search in MLA bibliography, search in JSTOR, search on the topic in the context of the time machine or H.G. Wells, and then jump out and search in a topical database where you can look up your topic in the context of modern science or science of H.G. Wells' day. If you need help finding newspapers like the one I gave a snapshot of there, get in touch with me. Reach out and set up some time. I'm here to book time with you guys, whether that's remotely or in person, okay? So reach out, set up a one-on-one, and we can work on your topic. Good luck, guys.